it snowing everywhere where you guys are? I was not expecting snow today. Participants, we don't have any more. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Welcome. Thanks for attending. Hope everybody is safe or been driving safe today. Um, we are going to be talking about servicing the needs of senior clients. Now, a lot of you have your cameras turned off. So if you can't raise your hand, maybe you can do your little hand raise on the training. And I'm just curious, how many of you have experience working with clients who are senior citizens? Josh does. Tanner Hagen does. Amber Perez says she's done a handful. Noelle has. No snow in Vegas. Huh? You picked a good time to go away, Tanner. Chris Kavalik has experience with seniors. Okay, that's great. Um, I have helped several senior clients, and I think we're going to see even more of that as real estate progresses over the next 7 years. I know they had predicted for a while that a larger portion of senior citizens would, or baby boomers would end up selling their properties before 2024, and we didn't see as many of them merge into the market. But I have some interesting statistics to share with everyone today about where that generation is going and the amount of wealth that they have kind of stuck into their homes or in their homes right now. And anticipate that we would eventually see a lot more seniors kind of emerging into the market. So I'm going to share my screen. And if you guys can just let me know that you are able to see it, great. I cannot figure that out for whatever reason. It does not want to share on that one. Yeah. Sorry, you're just kind of sitting at the side angle there. It's only televising on one of our TVs here at the office. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Anyone comment for me? Yes, you can see it.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Get this little toolbar here. Thanks for the thumbs up, Tanner. Okay. So, serving the needs of senior clients. This is a quote that I really liked. To care for those who once cared for us is one of the highest honors. There is such an extreme amount of scams out there nowadays, really affecting senior citizens and just kind of taking advantage of, maybe they're not advancing with certain types of technologies and things that we are or that older generations are. And to me, this is a class that deserves a different level of protection based on that. So I want to talk a little bit about how we can take care of the emotional needs that go along with senior citizens who are buying and selling homes. Now, someone who's 55 and they are downsizing, they're not necessarily a senior, but maybe they're looking for their home that's the next, you know, 10 to 15 years for them. That's very different than someone who has probably been in their home for a long time. And so you're going to treat those clients each a little bit differently. Here are some interesting stats related to senior citizens, and this comes from a Joint Collective Housing Statistics report that was done by Harvard University. And I thought some of this was pretty interesting. So an estimated 10,000 baby boomers reach age 65 every single day. That's why there's a lot of talk about Social Security being in trouble, right? Because how many baby boomers are now qualifying for Social Security? And by the year 2030, all baby boomers will have reached or passed age 65. So we're 6 years away from that, guys, right? Where they are of retirement age, and a lot of them will be looking to transition into probably the last move that they're going to make. Baby boomers have been in their homes for an average of 30 years, with a substantial number looking to sell or downsize in the near future. Substantial number, what is that? It's based on polls that are out there and the amount of equity that they have in their homes right now. Many of them have their homes completely paid for, and they will oftentimes do be snowbirds if they're up in a community or a state like ours where it's snowing out and want to own two properties. And so they'll be looking for ways to capitalize on the equity that they have in their existing homes. Market analysis predicts that up to 30% of baby boomers may sell their homes in the next 3 years. That's a good percentage. When you look at 10,000 a day, kind of reaching that age of 65, 30%, I'm not going to do the math quickly, but I mean, that's a significant number of sellers that will be merging into the market or emerging in the market. So that could represent, a significant shift in the real estate landscape. Are we looking at investments in more one-level living? Maybe here in Minnesota, you've noticed a rise in cooperatives that are starting to come up and seniors really desiring to kind of buy into a co-op setting. There's also a rise in certain types of retirement communities where it is basically a large association of one-level living villas or townhomes, and they have certain amenities that are all geared towards senior population or retired population. There's also types of properties out there that allow for transitional moves where you maybe rent and have hospice available to you in the same building. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go down the line as well. Senior citizens have a net worth that is 3 times greater than that of younger generations. They have a lot more money to work with, right? Like they're the original investors in Apple stock, and it's been sitting there for 30 or 40 years. You have to think about the accumulated wealth that they have and how they see the value of purchasing a property. You've worked with clients that maybe bring their parents along. Oftentimes you'll hear like the dads say or the parents say, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe that this property is worth this. But the flip side of that is they own one of those properties that they've seen the appreciation on, and now they have a significant amount of equity, adding to their wealth overall. Nearly 79% of households headed by those over age 65 own their own homes. That's a staggering statistic. 79% of people over the age of 65 owning their own home, right? So that's a large group of people that will be emerging into real estate. So it means that we're going to see a lot of senior clients probably within the next 3 to 6 years. I am working more with seniors now in the last 2 years than I have before. I would say they make up close to 40% of my client base. So having this information is really timely as well for serving the needs of those people. So first part here, understanding the needs of elderly clients. And before I go into this, I just want to say Nicole wanted to be a part of this training. I've just been slammed busy. You're welcome to come up and stand with me if you'd like and add in any commentary as we go along. I know that you've got a lot of experience in this area as well, so it's up to you. Understanding the needs of elderly clients. So this is just kind of an overview. Obviously, there are physical and cognitive changes that come. A lot of studies show that right around age 68 is when you start to see more of that decline in physical fitness, as well as, processing things, right? So those are some changes that come with age, and they can affect mobility, vision, hearing. In turn, that's going to influence what clients are looking for in a new home. I recommend using large text documents and making sure that you're in well-lit areas when you're having meetings with senior citizens. Most of them have always wanted to meet me in their home. So they want to be in a place that they are comfortable, where they can kind of control the setting or surrounding. Kind of make room for people. I wasn't gonna control. Sure. Well, with your parents too. I think.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things you have to realize too is hearing. If you're in a loud spot like a restaurant or something like that, they can't hear you, even if they have hearing aids in. So like Jelena just said, like meet them in their home where they're comfortable, speak loudly and slowly, and don't overwhelm them with too much information at one time.
Listening is really important. And I also think generationally, you probably experience this. It is so important to to show that you are active listening, because it's a sign of respect to generations, right? Like when they're talking, you're not interrupting. You need to show an active interest in what it is that they're saying. And that's just how respect is conveyed. I didn't put anything in here on dress and grooming, but I would encourage you to like be presentable as well. I mean, a lot of these people, they grew up with their parents all day long.
Well, and the men wore suits to work like every single day, right? So professional dress is a little bit more important with this demographic.
Great.
Yeah, every time you see them, Angie said, not just the first time.
I would also recommend that you be prepared to sign paperwork in person or guide them through electronic signing in person on your computer. So we have the option of doing, if you have a touch screen or you want to set up your email as a host, know that that's what's going to happen. Technology, the older they are, they just, even if they've kind of worked their way through it, it can be a really big source of frustration. And that adds to like the emotion of the experience. And every senior client I have had has requested that all of their paperwork be printed for them and that they have paper copies. So even if they're willing to take it electronically, that it's just, again, it's a generational thing. It's a comfort thing. They want to make sure that they have easy access to their documents.
Well, I think too, they're also a little bit more concerned about identity theft and fraud. They become a very big target for online fraud, right? And especially because we talk a lot about fraud in this industry, they're going to be a little bit more paranoid about being taken advantage of, right? So if they get an electronic document to sign, they're going to be a little bit more leery to do that because they're worried if they click on it, they're going to get a virus or their identity is going to get stolen. Like they become a little bit more paranoid as they get older.
Yeah, paranoid as I get older.
Yeah.
That's a great point that you make. So keep this in mind, along with what Nicole's saying, like that's not just our part. That conveys all the way through the entire transaction, through how title will communicate with them. If they are making a purchase, how their lender will communicate with them. So choosing the right partnerships where maybe meetings can be handled in person or there's a little more hands-on service being delivered, especially through title, I think is really important.
Well, and like for a list, like I currently have a listing with a little bit more like mature client. And so when I see that emails are going out from the transaction team from title, I call them and say, hey, I see that you're starting to get these emails because there's a purchase agreement on your home. These emails are okay. These people are approved by me. Like this is part of my team and this is okay content for you. So like I give them that little extra step of reassurance that you're not being spammed. These people are actually part of my team and are getting you information. And if they ask you for information, we need you to respond.
I think that's great. I'm actually I'm going to circle back to these 2 points here because I want to continue on with what Nicole's talking about, which really falls under communication and relationship building. So touch a little bit more on your experience or style of communication when you're working with senior clients. I think that the pace that you speak at is really important, making sure that they have time to digest the information, setting the tone for what to expect, like you had just talked about. Do you do anything as far as like usually using visual aids, or do you encourage them to take notes or anything when you're having meetings?
Not really. Actually, so like with the majority is specifically sellers, right? Because a lot of times when you're dealing with this demographic, they're going to be downsizing, right? So they might be selling and not buying. I'll send them an email with the content if they ask for it. But a lot of times, like I'm printing out my listing presentation and I'm taking it with me as a hard copy. I may not leave all of it behind because I feel like some of it's proprietary information, but I do tend to go through things in paper copy versus just emailing them the high note presentation and expecting that they're going to go through it. Because again, then they're clicking on a link and they're not really sure about it, right? So that kind of adds to that online insecurity that they naturally have. So like I tend to do a little bit more of it in print and writing, even if it's just taking the listing brochure out of the folder and going through the different bullet points within it. Like that may be enough versus having to print out something entirely different. Like, maybe you're using Moxie for your comparables and you're just emailing it to people. Like I almost go back to the old like MLS CMA and print the CMA because they're not going to necessarily care that it's super pretty and all the graphics and all that kind of stuff. They just want to see the content.
Yeah.
And they want it to be like accessible, right? So it's a little bit more basic and not as overwhelming. So I take out a lot of the unnecessary papers within a CMA. Like they want to see the comparables, they want to see the price ranges. That's really all they care about. So I would say almost like less information is more because you don't want to overwhelm them.
Yeah, I'd like to do a summary email as well. So I will follow the same process as Nicole. I prefer to do everything in paper because honestly, I have enough experience. I know that's what they're going to ask for. So I just kind of come prepared that way. But then most seniors have some form of email and they're savvy enough that, telling them you're going to send a summary and email of our conversation, even if that's for our own records, is just a great way to just put that in writing as well. So I choose to do that. I'm not going to take notes and put it in like written form, but making sure that they have all the information they have, and then there's a summary.
So like after I've gone through with them, I'll say, would you like me to send you a PDF of this information? Like most of them do know what a PDF is. And so they're like, oh yeah, that would be helpful to have that. So
yeah,
and that's always like a good post appointment follow up anyway.
When it comes to building trust and rapport, I think that, building a connection with elderly clients is really important, showing genuine interest in their experiences, being dependable. They want to know where things stand. So make it a point to provide a regular weekly update to them, even if it's just, hey, nothing's changed since last week. This really shows that they are always top of mind and you are thinking of their needs. And I have had so many clients, they don't want to have to call you and say, what's happening with the sale of my property or what's happening on the buy side. If you set the tone up front, being consistent with communication, I'm going to call you every week on a Tuesday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon or Tuesday afternoon, just to give you an update. Even if there's no update, it's a chance for you to ask questions. That provides consistency that I think is really important through the process as well. And then handling sensitive topics. Topics like downsizing or moving to assisted living really require sensitivity. You want to introduce those with maybe, some positive outcomes or similar situations. If you've had clients who've had really good experience transitioning out of their own home that they've been in for 30 years, and now they're living in a different setting. So focusing on those benefits is a great way to kind of ease into that conversation. And you also want to know what options are available to them, which we'll talk a little bit more below, but be kind through that process because one thing that I tell everyone is, or I think is important to any time you're working with seniors over a certain age, there is so much emotion involved in selling a home they've been in for that length of time. And for a lot of them, they recognize they are now entering into the sunset period of their life. And it is very emotional. And they might have a certain lifestyle that they want to live, but it also comes with some grief.
Yeah.
And
change is scary too. Like I think change is hard for everybody, but when you get to that age and you know that you're kind of losing your independence, right? Like that's a really scary thing.
It is. And that's for a lot of them, if they've been in their house for a long period of time, they're not looking to just go into one level living. Maybe they're not going to own anymore. So, come in with an open mind and a lot of care for the fact that if these were your parents or your grandparents, how would you want this experience to go for them? Under emotional aspects of selling, I'm kind of curious and your experience and feedback. I found that obviously patience and active listening go a long way in really supporting them through the process, but not just listening to what their needs are, let them tell their stories.
Yeah.
There's a lot of emotion and memories that are tied up into their homes.
Yeah.
And they want to be able to tell you about what their kids did and who had what room and memories that they had about when they added the addition to their home, or they put that backyard in, or they finally added a fence because they got their first dog. There's a lot of stories there. And that to me really shows care and concern. And with that comes a longer appointment time.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. Like, don't think that you're gonna be in and out of there in 30 minutes.
Absolutely not.
Those appointments can take 2 hours.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Clients who just closed, from the buy and sell, I worked with them for a year and a half. They are forever friends now.
Yeah.
Use and return age, and it's like, I love them.
Yeah.
They are like family now.
Yep. I had a client last year who seniors, he's 86 years old. He had like heart surgery, so he says he's going to live another 100 years. His name's Leroy. He's a woodworker. This last year in December, he mailed like little reindeer, Santa's reindeer, to my house for all of my kids that he like handmade and stained. So like when you are taking care of them, you are developing a relationship with them, but not just them. You have to think about the family that's on the other side of that as well, right? Like it can lead to a lot of referrals. Not that that's why you're doing it, but I mean, that's a great aspect of our business. You're dealing with kids and grandkids, and they see that you're taking care of someone they love. They will trust you and they will want to bring business your way.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if you've talked about this at all. I do offer like a lot of extra services to people
yes,
that are is that in here?
it's coming up. Yeah.
Okay.
I can transition to it.
Okay. Just keep going.
Sure. So really quick, I just wanted to touch a little bit on like diverse living needs and preferences. So every one of your senior clients is going to have a unique need or preference. Some are looking to downsize, others want to be closer to healthcare facilities or family. They may even want transitional living settings, which we'll talk a little bit more about down the outline as well. But make sure that you're conducting thorough interviews with them so that you really understand their needs fully, and be prepared that family is going to be part of that conversation.
Yeah, I would say a good majority of the time, like if I meet with them independently, I always ask like, hey, do your kids want to be a part of this conversation? Or is there somebody else that we need to keep in the loop on the process, during the sale of your home? Because they may want their kids involved.
Yep.
And I would like never shy away from that, because your kids can be their kids can be your ally.
I'm gonna let you talk about that section. Role
Okay.
of family and decision making.
Yeah.
So you just kind of touched really well on this. Family plays a big role. A lot of times they are the driving force behind it. Like the parents are dead set, I'm going to die in my house.
Yeah.
But their needs now cannot be served living independently or on their own.
Well, and there could be one spouse that still is like relatively capable, high functioning, both mentally and physically. And then there's one spouse that's declining a little bit more rapidly. So a lot of times they're selling their house because one spouse needs it more than the other, right? So, when you talk about what does the facility look like that they're going to be going into, that's an important part of that decision. Like what kind of care are they going to need, either short-term or long-term?
Yeah. And when it comes to families' involvement in those conversations, like children might have a very different idea of where they want their parent to go than the parents want. So there might be you're a little bit of a liaison sometimes between representing your client and limiting the involvement of the children, but being very sensitive to the fact the kids are the ones who are going to take on kind of care at a certain point.
Well, the other thing too is like the kids may have a realtor that they've used. And so when mom and dad say, oh, we talked to a realtor, they may jump in and say, oh, I want you to talk to my realtor. Right. So if you're immediate, like if you're bringing the kids in the loop, and you're including them in that conversation and you build the trust with them as well, you may encounter a little less resistance. A little less resistance as far as like any competition. I see on the slide here, it talks about POA. So POA is power of attorney. So I think this is a really important thing to talk about.
Yep, I have a whole list up here of documents that I tell people to have ready to go.
Okay.
So you go ahead.
So specifically with power of attorney, even if a couple is married, if something happens to one spouse where they are no longer mentally capable of making decisions, the other spouse needs to actually have power of attorney to be able to sign their name. So like last year, I had an elderly couple selling their home. She had a really hard time even writing her name, even though it seemed like she understood what she was signing. She physically had a hard time writing her name. Pulled the husband and I aside and I said, we may want to have a power of attorney put in place because at closing, there's probably 15 documents that she's going to need to sign. If it's too hard for her to do that, one, we could have a little bit of resistance from the title company because they need to, doesn't a title company need to like make sure that the person signing the document is of sound mind and body, right? They need to be able to, the closer needs to be able to say, okay, I feel like this person actually knew what they were signing, right? And if they can't justify that, even with the spouse sitting there, having a power of attorney in place so the capable spouse can just sign everything it's just like a good safety net, right? So they did end up talking to their estate attorney. They already had a power of attorney put in place. So like we were able to just use that document that was already there. But the other thing is like what happens if somebody dies in the middle of a transaction? Like it's a horrible thing to think about.
Yeah.
I had a seller die 2 weeks before closing of pancreatic cancer. It was a very quick diagnosis. She had 2 chemo treatments and she died 2 weeks later. And it was horrible. And there was no surviving spouse. So now the property has to go through probate. Like it was a disaster. We got through it, but making sure that any senior client has an estate plan, a will, trust, things like that, that actually say like if there's a transfer on death deed, if there's what happens to the property if something happens to the owner.
Yep. So my uncle, I'm actually selling my uncle's property. He's on a 10-acre farm, and my aunt died a couple of years ago, and he would die on the property, but he can't. So we just had a meeting and decided, hey, we're going to give power of attorney to my cousin, who is also the executor of his estate, and had everything in line in the event that if my uncle were to pass away while we're getting his house on the market and ready to go, he's had a couple of heart attacks in the last 2 months, that we can just carry on with the process of selling, and we don't have to have months and months of delay in probate because all of those things are already in place. I'm going to send this outline to everybody, but all of the documents that Nicole has just been talking about are right here under legal and financial considerations. Because so many people in this generation keep paper copies of everything and they're not necessarily electronic. If you know that you're going to be selling a property for them or helping them buy a property, give them a list like this and have them find copies of all of that, make you copies. Every senior I've had has had some kind of a copier at home for them on their printer.
Or they have like a little safe where all of their documents are already being kept. Right?
Exactly. So easily accessible, and then copies to you if you were to need them at all. So go ahead and review this page on legal and financial considerations for all of the documents that could be helpful in the process.
Well, the other thing too is like if somebody does pass, like it's emotionally traumatic for the family.
Correct.
Right. So going through these steps beforehand and having the conversation so you know like that there is actually a plan in place and not having to put your real estate transaction on hold like Jelena just said. Like you can give the family the reassurance like, okay, we have everything in place.
Yep.
So if something does happen, we can just keep moving forward and you're not going to have to think about this part of it. You can just grieve the loss of your family.
Yeah, that's really important as well. I have another senior client where he was 92 and he was in a nursing home and just kept saying, I just want to go back to my house. I want to go back to my house. And it had to be, the property had to be sold because they knew like he was rapidly deteriorating. Um, he signed the power of attorney because he knew he wasn't doing so well. Even though he wanted to be informed in the process, he was okay letting his family take over everything. And within a week of closing, he actually like, I don't know if you want to call it a coma, but basically like his heart was just shutting down to the point where he just slept all day and he died within a week of the actual closing. So you know, had we had closing delayed 2 weeks, he would have died in the process. But having those documents in place allowed all of the signing to be done ahead of time and move forward with things.
Yeah.
So
one thing I will say though, even with the power of attorney, if you only have a power of attorney in place, if the person passes away, the power of attorney becomes null and void.
it goes to the
So
executive estate.
then it has to become part of the estate.
Probate.
So yeah, and go to probate. So if just because you have a power of attorney doesn't mean that you're clear, because they actually have to verify that the person that you're signing for is still alive. Steve actually had a situation like this several years ago where the seller was in the hospital. I think it was when we were cool. It was maybe even Leslie. I think she had to like somebody had to go to the hospital and get the physician to verify that the guy that was in surgery was still alive. Like they take that very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So just because there's a power of attorney doesn't mean that you're good to go. If the person passes, that power of attorney becomes void.
Yeah. Part of and I don't want to call it an exception, but along with that is if you have two spouses and one who passes away prior to a closing and the other had power of attorney, if it is a situation where it is joint tenancy and the ownership transfers all to the surviving spouse, then like death certificates are required, but the sale can still move forward. So just so you know, if anything like that were to ever happen for you, please reach out to people who have experience in this field and can help you navigate through it and communicate to your clients what to expect. Yeah. I want to transition to understanding and navigating reverse mortgage situations. I have had two clients now who were in reverse mortgage situations where they would have ended up in foreclosure because they were paying out way more equity than they should have. There are some guidelines in place, and I feel that that seniors tend to be, well, they have a target on their back sometimes for taking advantage of them, right? Like not necessarily knowing everything that goes into these type of loan situations. So brief overview. I think it's important to understand what reverse mortgages are. It is not where you pay a loan. The loan is basically paid out to the senior. It's designed for people over age 62. It allows them to convert part of their equity into cash without having to sell their home or give up title, and they don't have to take on new mortgage payments. Instead of making payments to the lender, they receive the funds as a lump sum or in fixed payments or as a line of credit. Everyone I've done so far has been a fixed monthly payment. You need this.
Something in the chat. Oh, okay, never mind.
Okay.
Oh, one of my elderly clients got hacked in their email last year. Sad happens. Yep.
Okay, this was the beginning when I had first asked if anyone had worked with senior clients. So, okay, we're all up to date. When it comes to reverse mortgage, again, all of them were taking fixed monthly payments and they were deposited into direct deposit into the owner's account. Now, if there's any incapacitation that happens with that owner and family members didn't know about it, those payments are just going to continue to come through. pretty soon you have exceeded 20% equity, 30% equity being paid out on the property. And it can get into a situation where when you go to sell, you have to pay off that loan. And if there's not enough equity left in the property, you are now underwater, right? And the funds have to be available on the side somewhere to pay the remainder off. So if you run into a situation where there's a reverse mortgage on a property with your seniors, it's really important to understand how this works. Feel free to ask questions to anybody who is more experienced with this. This is just some information on how it, is a source of financial relief for a lot of seniors. Please take some time when I email this out just to familiarize yourself with what a reverse mortgage is.
Does anybody think it would be valuable to have, we could talk about this offline too, but have an estate attorney come in and talk about like different types of estates and how that impacts property and property sale? You want to note something in the comment in the chat if you think that would be helpful. I have an estate attorney that I work with. That would probably be more than happy to do a class.
I think something like that would be beneficial down the line for sure. Estate attorney and estate planning, or even someone who specializes in estate sales to explain, like we could do a whole thing on something like that. Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about health and safety in housing. If you're working with elderly clients and they are looking to make a purchase, maybe they're selling their single family home and now they're looking for a retirement community or something. What are the features that are really standing out to them? They want a safe place, a safe home that is easily accessible where they can age in place. That's oftentimes the priority. They do not like moving. So if they're selling their existing home and they're not going into assisted living, they're probably saying, I'm going to spend the next 20 years to 30 years of my life for the next house I buy, and I'm going to die there. I've had several clients tell me that. So just know your client and what they're looking for. They might be interested in no-step entryways, one-level living, bathroom grab bars or wide doorways that are more handicap accessible, so that in the event health issues did come up, they are not displaced from their home, but rather it accommodates maybe like a live-in nurse or something like that. I also provide a list of trusted contractors if they need it, so that they can make modifications to a home if need be. And then smart home technologies can offer a lot of security and convenience to them. And some of those upgrades are actually covered by insurance. So keep this in mind if you're working with new construction. If they have a one-level living, but it has a basement, if they know that they're going to make their next move with their kids, and maybe mom and dad are staying downstairs or something, and they need an chair assist that goes up the stairway, those things can be accommodated after the fact through insurance. So there's not necessarily an advantage to building it into the house and paying that upfront expense. So just know your client, and that some of those things might come up after they actually make the purchase. Looking for communities designed for seniors. And I want Nicole to be a part of this conversation because she has a unique situation with her parents. Retirement communities are growing in popularity. They're very expensive. Most of them are HOAs, and they include exterior maintenance. They will have, specialized or all be like one-level living villas or detached townhomes. Some features come with like big community centers that have planned activities. So they have days where they have aerobics, or they have games and events for, the senior citizens and retirees to be active in their communities. And then they'll also have like designated days for friends and family to come to like the pool, or they might have quiet hours that are in effect for the entire community. So learn where some of those are. Pulte has a big one in Chaska. I have clients who moved into that. They absolutely love it. It's an all senior community. So it would be a 55 plus. And there's lots of rules, but they love that they have all these companies come in and sponsor events at their community center, and they have a full schedule a month in advance of exercise classes and swim days and chess club and a theater group and all these things. So it's like fun for that. It's like a cruise.
Super cool.
It's the first time I've heard of that. So
yeah, I've never heard anything that elaborate.
They are growing in popularity. And then this part I would love for you to talk about because of our conversation we had about your mom and dad.
Yeah, so transitional housing communities may better wait list. So one, I don't know, like co-ops, is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm thinking more of like, if you've heard of Friendship Village, like a multi-care
Oh,
facility.
okay. So there's facilities out there, like, so they rent in these types of facilities. They're not ownership, but there's like independent living and then assisted living and then nursing home care
Mhm.
and oftentimes hospice and memory care and whatever. So there's like advanced care options. But if again, like if you go back to maybe there's one spouse that's very able, like bodied and mind, and there's another spouse that's deteriorating quickly, like they could go into an independent living situation. And if one spouse accelerates, like their decline accelerates, one spouse could get moved over to say memory care,
Mhm.
and the able-bodied spouse is much easier able to visit and go back and forth because it's all in a connected facility,
Yeah, it's all
right?
under the
So
same
it's all,
roof.
yeah, all under the same roof, all like sometimes there's different costs associated with different levels of care. Well, there's almost always different costs associated with different levels of care, but they might be able to just write one check for the whole thing.
Yep.
Right. And a lot of times they have like a restaurant on site. So they can participate in a meal plan. So even if they're in independent living, but they want to go down to more of like a restaurant for at least one meal a day, they buy like a meal package for those. And they have a lot of activities like Jelena was talking about, where maybe they do exercise classes and a library, and they might have like a book club. They might have like a wood shop room.
They have like
things
Metro
like
Mobility that can come and bring them all to the grocery store.
Yeah.
Or doctor's appointments. So
So as they lose some of their independence, they have services that help fill in those gaps.
and I wanted to talk about this.
Facilities.
They are actually, I didn't know about them until I helped a client with that a few years ago, and that's where they were going. Yes, but I wanted to bring that up because if you are selling an existing home for senior clients and they're going into one of these facilities, it will really dictate the timeline because there's a lot of wait lists there.
Yeah.
So prepare for the fact they will, maybe you have a listing agreement signed and you're not ready to go on to the market, or you're making it contingent to when this apartment becomes available for them or whatever the living situation is. Most of the time, people who go into these facilities transition into independent living in an apartment. Then they need assisted living where someone will come in and help them in the apartment. And then they may need on-site medical care and, go into the nursing home side, and then from there hospice. So it is definitely transitional, but timeline is a big factor with these communities. So if you talk with your clients and you know that they're waiting to get into that, just understand that you might have to do a little extra work, I guess, in setting up or establishing a timeline for the sale of the property.
Yeah. And a lot of it is like, if a spot opens up, they need to accept it or they're going to lose it, right? And then they get put back on the wait list, right? So I think part of it too is giving them peace of mind. Like, hey, if that spot comes open, even if you don't feel like you're ready to sell the house, accept the spot and we can expedite the process of cleaning out your house, right? And reassure them, hey, like you can take with you what you need. And then once you're moved into that new facility, then we have an estate sale company coming in. Then we have a handyman come in. Then we do all this stuff. Like you don't have to be living here to be able to do the things to your house that you need to do to get ready to sell. And a lot of times, like that's where I step in. If they don't have like a kid that lives close, or like an adult child, right, that lives close by, that's going to help facilitate some of the stuff. Like I do some of the stuff for these people that their kids would do. Like I'm not going through their personal property and like sorting pictures or anything like that, deciding like what to keep and what to take. They have to do all that kind of stuff, but like coordinating handyman, coordinating carpet cleaning, cleaning the house, like coordinating all the services around it. I end up doing that stuff for them. So their kids typically, like their kids don't necessarily have to unless they want to. like their kids may live on the other side of the cities, and the parents are trying to sell a house in Apple Valley, and they're not going to come 45 minutes to an hour each way to let the cleaning lady in. So I just like run over to the house and let the cleaning lady in, right? So a lot of times, like I step in and help people with stuff that their kids would normally do, just because it's easier for me.
So I'm going to use that as kind of the transition into this last part. I wanted to end this training on selling their long-term homes because more often than not, this is the experience that you're going to have. And there's a section down here that really talks about preparing for the sale, which is what Nicole had just gone over. But keep these things in mind. So like, it's really important to acknowledge that this is a significant life event and there's a lot of emotional challenges that come with this for people. They've lived in their homes a long time. They know their next move may be their last one. So many memories are attached to this. They have a deep emotional attachment to their home, and understanding that is really crucial. They're not just buildings for them, right? It's their life that's in that house.
I mean, a lot of times they've lived there for 40 some years,
Yeah.
right? And it's a huge emotional attachment.
My oldest senior, he was 86, 55 years he had been in his house in Bloomington. 55 years. I mean, that was a lifetime in that house. Make it a point to listen and empathize with their stories. You know, you want to respect, have respect for their life and the life that they lived in that house. Honoring their past is really what's going to help them kind of move forward. So give them again the time to tell you those stories and prepare for a long listing appointment. So as Nicole had mentioned previously, 2 hours, I would say I've never done one less than 2 hours with a senior, just out of respect.
Mhm.
They want you to sit down, say yes to the cup of coffee.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It's so important. They're going to bring out the Entenmann's cake or whatever it is
Right.
they got, right?
Right.
Because that's how it was growing
Right.
in the 80s, 70s and 80s. It's just what you did when company came over.
Yeah.
So prepare for that type of appointment. And then when it comes to preparing for the sale, Josh, this will kind of dive a little bit into what your question was in the Slack or in the comment section, and what Nicole had just talked about, right? There's a lot of decluttering that's involved, maybe some renovations, but it might not work with what their lifestyle is. And maybe in their mind, renovating the house is just erasing their memories, and they're going to be very sensitive to that. So you're going to have to guide them through the process gently. Professional organizers, stagers, what you've been willing to do, a lot more hands-on with these type of clients. Nicole already talked about a little bit, but it really does contribute to more of a stress-free experience for them.
There's a company called Gentle Transitions. So depending on like how much stuff people have or if they know where they're going. So this company one will like, they'll get the floor plan or they'll tour the facility of the people of where the people are going, like if they already know where they're going. And based on that floor plan, they'll evaluate their possessions and help them figure out what will actually fit. So, right, like you're going to bring a bed, you're going to bring a couch, you're going to bring the lazy boy that you've had for 30 years, even if it's nasty. All those types of things, like this company can help them determine what stuff they actually have room for. And I believe they also coordinate estate sales, or they have somebody that does that for them, but it's kind of an umbrella company for a whole bunch of different services.
I think that's a really great resource to have because I included this in this last point here. You have to remember who this generation of persons are, okay? What they represent. Their parents, grandparents survived the Great Depression. They've been through World War in some cases, or their parents went through World War where they had nothing. And so they were raised, they're keepers, and keepers is a nicer way to say hoarders.
Yeah.
My parents were like that, and navigating that after my mom died was really challenging. My dad had the hardest time letting anything go, and he saw value in absolutely every little thing. And he didn't want to throw anything away because he said someone will want it or someone will need it.
Or like, what if, yeah, they don't want to get rid of something because what if I need it?
Yep.
Right? And then it costs more to replace it than it does to keep it.
Yep. So there's huge attachment to possessions and values. You might have to have hard conversations and coordinate a junk removal service, or know that their timeline is going to revolve around being able to do like a garage sale, and where they see value in passing something on to other people or to offering it in their church. So again, that kind of goes into planning for the timeline and setting expectation for the type of additional services you would have to recommend or provide for them. And then navigating the market. I think we got 5 minutes left, so I want to be mindful of these last couple points. Understanding the current market and setting realistic expectations is key. You can give them a CMA, but you want to break it down into understandable terms. And I'm like Nicole, like when it comes to seniors, I don't do fancy presentations. I will do the data with a printout from the MLS where everything is there for them to look through themselves. It's important to me that my clients really feel confident and informed about the process, knowing that their home is going to be passed on to someone else who is going to respect it as well. That's really important. Pricing might be a challenge because maybe updates are not something that they can really do or that they want to do. And so then you're pricing the home according to it needing a full makeover. And depending on how long they've lived there and the last time they did updates, I mean, that it might be hard to find comparables that are really, in line with what the home is valued at. So,
well, and that's kind of where the kids too can kind of come into play. Like if you pull them aside and you be like, look, I really think that we need to replace the carpet, but your mom or dad is really resisting this. Like they're going to be moved out and we can just have a carpet company come in and replace the carpet. And it's outside of writing a check, it's going to cause them any like grief or time or anything like that. Like I'll coordinate the whole thing. Like, could you have a conversation with your mom or dad or whoever and convince them that this is a good idea?
Leveraging the power of the family. Totally. Yes. Very, very smart. Support through the transition. Just remember that this transition for them can be overwhelming.
Right.
I don't really just look at it as my role in just kind of helping them sell, their home. I'm there to support them through the entire journey. And I can't speak for everyone, but I have a really big soft spot in my life for seniors. My best friend when I was 26 years old was 87, and we got together every week, 2 times a week. We had coffee with each other. I had coffee with him every Saturday morning, and every Thursday night I went to his house for Bible study, and he was a great baker and he had the best stories to tell ever. And we were genuinely best friends. His name was Abraham. I could listen to him all day. These are people who have had amazing lives. They have great perspective on how far life has come. And this might be a very sensitive transition for them. And so taking care of them is something that they deserve, right? You need to care about your clients because they deserve it, not just because you're getting paid to sell a property for them.
Yeah.
So this last part here, we've already talked about just on connecting them with services and being willing to go the extra mile to actually do the service for them, if that's what it takes for them to have a great experience. It comes back to this: how do you want your mom and dad treated?
Right. Absolutely. Like, how would you want your grandparents to be treated? How would you want your parents to be treated, and offer that same service that you would expect?
Nicole is an expert when it comes to working with senior clients. I think I've just experienced, right?
Yeah.
Like we've had enough experience. If you have questions about any of that, please feel free to reach out to us. Happy to support you in any way that we can. Again, I'm going to send this outline to everyone.
That we don't do vacations, but we are keepers. That's so
Okay.
cute. Yeah.
It's cute. And Ethan, he had mentioned his grandma lived in Friendship Village in Iowa. So yeah, unique settings. Thank you everybody for joining us. If you're not going to be here for the meeting, which we're going to have low attendance and I'm going to have a lot of sandwiches today. You can certainly get busy prospecting through your database. Anybody who has been someone you met with, someone you've showed homes to, and they just haven't kind of moved things forward. I challenge you today to get into the MLS, find a property that's coming soon or might be a great fit, start texting them out, proposing showings, asking for some feedback and get them re-engaged in the process. Okay.
Well, and calling through ponds could be super effective today. It's snowing, the roads are bad, people are staying at home, right? So it might be a really good time to make phone calls.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Appreciate you, and everybody be safe today. Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Here, and where is my?
Here, stop.
Thank you.
Oh, stop there.
Then I need to stop recording.
Oh.
I'm tech literate.